Hi, everyone. I am Michael Carvin. I am the CEO and founder of SmartAsset. I am joined today by Rob Tutela, one of our financial advisors. So, welcome to our success series. Rob, welcome to the program here.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Love to start by just hearing a little bit about yourself and how you got into wealth management.
So shortly after graduating college, made way into the world of finance. I was living in New York. So the obvious low-hanging fruit was throwing in job applications at a variety of the big banks in New York City. And I was lucky enough to be picked up by JP Morgan. Spent the early stages of my career working with them under their asset management division, learning more about portfolio management and client service, along with some trading that paved the way for me to then leap into the RIA world with Essex about 8, 9 years later. Since making that move, I've found that working on this side of the desk can be a lot more rewarding. If you're doing the right things and servicing your clients in the right way, you actually feel like you're helping people as opposed to just working for a big organization and meeting the needs of their agenda. So it's a pleasant change.
I know you've been a partner of SmartAsset for a number of years now. How did you approach organic growth before working with SmartAsset, and what is your approach to organic growth today?
Rewind back to 2019, 2020, COVID, right? Everything shut down. It was really hard to access prospects by way of, conventional in those days prospecting means going out to, get-togethers, networking lunches, just being social with people, right? It didn't exist with, snap of a finger. Everybody was stuck inside their house. So the CEO of Essex and I sat down and we started looking at other options for prospecting tools, and we kept hearing about online lead generation, just the next wave of what's going to take the RA industry by storm in terms of AUM growth. So we started poking around and looking at different options, and SmartAsset stuck out to us as kind of the market leader, and a good way to kind of dip our toe in the water, so to speak. It wasn't really difficult to onboard and take a bite-sized piece of what we felt was a reasonable budget just to experiment with things. And the initial experience was challenging, but seemed promising, right? So it's all about how you work the leads, consistency, delivering a good product, and not letting the failures hold you back. If you're going to do this kind of outreach, right, where it's not a formal introduction from somebody that you're already working with or a referral word of mouth, you're already fighting an uphill battle. So you're going to get hung up on, you're going to be told no, right? And if you are willing to take no for an answer, then everybody knows what happens. But if you're not, and you're willing to be persistent and try and prove to somebody that the opportunity is worth something, then you're going to have success, right? It's just a matter of time.
And was that the nature of the challenge in the early days? Was it getting people on the phone in the first place, or was it when you got them on the phone, it was hard to have a good dialogue with them?
I would say 50-50, right? Back when the platform first started, before there was integration with depth sales, it was a very manual process. Aside from the regulatory piece where you had to kind of keep track of your own correspondence, exactly when, what, who, right? All the pertinent details. The challenge was just getting somebody to engage with you, right? And I feel like a lot has changed in the last 4 or 5 years too, with the receptiveness with regard to the prospects that fill out the surveys. Again, back in 2020, everybody was on the computer. It was e-commerce. It was, everybody's on social media to stay connected. Everybody's, searching online for things, right? Just to kind of keep engaged. And maybe they filled the survey out just because they were bored. So the validity of the submission may not have been as strong, but now with more of a public presence, not just from SmartAsset, but just in general from online lead gen in order to search for an advisor or search for anything really, whether it's somebody that's coming to, do a home renovation, a plumber, an electrician, these are more reputable sources now just by way of the evolution of the way we live. It's one thing to say, hey, I manage a portfolio for you. That's great, right? But it's another thing to say, well, I can do that and all of this, right? And so much more, right? And you can really make a difference in somebody's life. You can open their eyes and they stop and they say, wow, I never really thought of working with a financial advisor having that kind of an impact beyond just, my portfolio.
And so what were some of the insights that changed your experience from being a challenging one to driving success?
We had always gone into this thing knowing that it was a numbers game, right? Statistical probability, right? I mean, you go back to the old days where people were buying books of names and just cold calling and getting hung up on 99% of the time. We always knew it was going to be like that. But when it changed was probably, I'd say 9 months in, maybe a full year in, we started really seeing like engagement across the board, whether it be by way of email, by way of phone, or a combination of the two. Live leads were something that was kind of unique that really sparked our interest as well. We were getting calls on live leads more frequently. So it was almost like sentiment just changed in terms of the consumer base, right? Using SmartAsset to find the advisor. So the fact that we didn't let up off the gas pedal through all that really created a hockey stick in terms of the return of investment or return on investment for us in terms of our time and our energy, never mind the dollars we were pumping into the platform. But, once we were able to engage with people, I feel like that's the uphill struggle, right? Getting somebody to stop, give you 15 minutes to listen, and really show that person how you can help them. After that, it's downhill.
You're talking of metrics. Can you share some?
Yeah, so I mean, last year alone, we did about $10 million, close to $10 million on the platform. Obviously assets come in, assets go out. So, we're working on a net number. Last year was a great year. I found that in reference to metrics, right, and not getting discouraged, I found that when the market's like it is now, right, very choppy, very volatile, there's a lot of things going on geopolitically, economically, market trend. We've got shakeup in the White House, right? Change, uncertainty, right? Everybody seems to pause, right? It's the deer in headlight effect is what I like to reference it as. And everybody's guilty of it, right? Some are more galvanized than others. And those that are not galvanized tend to have more of the emotional reaction, but that's even more of a reason to work with an advisor to help temper that emotional reaction. Because that's the one thing you don't want to do is invest with emotion. You need to invest with a calculated approach and learn to stay the course when you've decided on. We are our own worst enemy. So just being able to experience both the up markets and the down markets, right? 22 was another case where we found it really hard just to generate engagement. But then move on to 2023 and everybody was ready to go, right? Once the Fed came in and started cutting rates, markets started to take off again. Everyone was willing to change. So, you're looking at a scenario where, again, if your value proposition is one that kind of embodies the true sense of fiduciary and the true sense of a comprehensive registered investment advisor, comprehensive planning, asset management, everything that affects your wallet or pocketbook, good or bad. And you can show them that. It's really not all that difficult to secure a prospect. Get a meeting. Once you've got the meeting, I mean, you're 80% of the way there.
How do you think about the return on your investment? It sounds like you generated 10 million in new assets last year. You know what you spent to do that, and how do you think about just your own rollout?
Yeah, our budget to date was about 6,000 a month, or is about 6,000 a month. So obviously generating that kind of a number, right? We're right at about looking at in aggregate the entire span of our investment with SmartAsset relative to the total AUM on the platform. plus those incoming flows for last year, we're at about a break-even point. So when we see something like that, I mean, the whole reason we went into this was to create a proof statement. Our goal in doing all this is to prove out that this platform works. If we were to develop a team of salespeople, juniors and seniors, we could create a hierarchy of people that call and focus on outreach to then funnel into senior advisors that would come in and close, as well as work with those newfound clients, right? And to do it in a way, not at 6,000 a month, but I mean, eventually it's 60,000 a month, right? I mean, just as big as the number can get sustainably is what we're willing to do if we can prove that it works, right? I'll rent more space, I'll hire more people. That's not the problem, right? I need to make sure the return on investment is there and the formula works.
For 2024, you were spending about $6,000 per month, say about 70,000 for the year, and generating 10 million in new assets. I'm going to guess rough numbers, you're charging about 1%.
We're flat 1%. And then you have to look at when those assets came in. So if 70% of those assets didn't come in till halfway through the year, it's only 50% attribution relative to the AUM on a 25 basis point per quarter calculation. But the pickup is never going to be in year one, right? You're always looking at year one is a sunken cost, and you're picking these clients up to then cover the cost for the subsequent year. So, you know, as long as you can keep that train rolling, it should in turn pick up more and more and more speed as you go, right? Can't let off the gas pedal. You can't get discouraged. Even though the markets are like this, and it's really easy to feel uneasy or unwilling when you don't have that receptiveness coming from the leads that you're purchasing. But it'll be there. I mean, I've had experiences with clients that I've never talked to by way of deft sales, just kind of emailing outreach, right? Campaign outreach. I had one end of last week. It was the last email in the set of 45 steps. And she came in for a meeting on Thursday, a day after that last email went out. She's like, "I'm so glad you emailed me. You know, the reminder just kind of fell in my lap, and I've been looking for somebody. Everybody I've been meeting with wasn't really the right fit, and I feel strongly, probably about a 9.5 out of 10 in terms of gauge. She's going to come on in the next few weeks, right? So even the ones that you think have gotten away aren't necessarily gone out of the picture. And we do make a practice of circling back, right? I mean, even though you've sent this lead a dozen emails and you've called them a dozen times and it's been a year since they came through the interface, doesn't mean that that person hasn't found an advisor, right? Life gets in the way, things happen, right? People are indecisive, they don't know what to do, right? So being persistent and being thorough, even on the old stuff that's lying dormant, can prove to be profitable.
And tell us about the kind of consumer that you're turning into clients. Are they people with $100,000 of investable assets, $1 million? Are they looking for financial planning, estate planning? How do you think about that?
So we're a bit unique in that regard. I mean, obviously everybody likes $1 million client. I've always been of the mindset that follows a more moral and ethical path, where if somebody, especially if they're younger, right? I mean, not a lot of people have $1 million, even $500,000, right? But they want to do the right things. They want to save. They want to be investing in the right places, diversifying their portfolio appropriately, refining protections in their life. Maybe they're looking to buy a house. They're looking to weigh the cost benefit of renting against owning. Working with somebody that can help you run all those calculations and forecasts, put together a plan for you and help guide you through decision making. Just because you don't have $500,000, right, or $250,000 or whatever the minimum is, shouldn't act as a deterrent for that person getting that help. So I've always been of the mindset, if you're willing to commit to the plan that we put together for you, and maybe you fall short of conventional minimums, I'm always willing to work with you, right? It's more about the effort with which you show and or put into working the steps of said plan versus the assets you bring to the table on day one, because a lot of the earliest clients of Essex, and we're going back over 20 years, started by depositing just $100 a week from their paycheck, right? And now they're sitting on 8, 9, 10, 12 million dollar households, right? Because they made the right choices. They tightened their belt when it came to a budget and spending. Where do you save? How do you save? If you run a business, you're a business owner, right? The solutions that we can put in front of you to save on taxes, but keep money in your pocket and maneuver from year to year, will make a big difference when you look at it in the zoomed out perspective, right? Take a step back and just really look at the growth over time, and it makes a big difference.
What tips would you have for an advisor, maybe like you guys when you first got started was having some challenges? What tips would you have either in the, how to do the outreach, how to close more business?
Well, for starters, I think you've got to learn to fail, right? And some people have that natural God-given, right, sales mentality where you can get hung up on 100 times and you still make that 101st phone call with the same tenacity and enthusiasm as you did the first. So if that's your hurdle coming into this, learn to fail, right? Nothing ever came to anybody without failure being the first step, right? It breeds success. The second is learn to develop your value proposition. And if you don't have a good value proposition, I would encourage you to refine your process so that you're doing something that sets yourself aside from your competitors, or at least does justice in the eyes of the prospect you're talking to. And why is my time as a prospect worth sitting here talking to you, right? What are you going to do for me that I can't do myself, or that my existing advisor can't do for me, right? Because I see that a lot on the surveys. I'd like another advisor's perspective, or I'd like a second opinion, right? And it's not necessarily about that second opinion. Sometimes it's just learning to be likable. If you have good attitude, a good head on your shoulders, and a sound plan for that person and their short and long-term goals, that's all you need, right? Versus the advisor that is more like dry white toast, that doesn't have the personality, doesn't have the likability. Not that they're not a good person or can socialize, but it's a working relationship. I mean, these people are hiring you to do a job, but at the end of the day, they're trusting you with everything they have. So if you can take that relationship and one up it to a real relationship where you become friendly with them as well as professional with them, the connections that you make in doing so really do justice for the business. I'd say 99% of the clients we have here at Essex are sticky, right? Very low turnover. And it's because of those relationships that we form with our client base beyond just, hey, I'm the guy that manages your portfolio, right? Pick up the phone. They're talking to me about their kid's baseball game or their daughter's dance recital or the vacation they just went on, right? It's becoming more of a piece of their life, right? From year to year, from stage to stage. And they really want to and like working with you. So, I feel like that does help a great deal as well.
That's great advice. It really is a relationship-driven business. I'm curious, are there KPIs that you pay close attention to make sure you're on track? What do you look at and what can you share there?
What I like to see at the very least is that I'm engaging with, or when the leads come through, I've got, at least one lead from each month's worth of lead sources that I've had the opportunity to sit with, whether it be on Zoom, whether it be on a phone call, in the office. I find that when you can get that initial meeting in whatever format best fits the prospect, the chances of your close rate jump by more than 50%, right? Assuming that you can deliver that value proposition and connect with that person on a level that supersedes what their expectations are or what their existing relationship kind of embodies. Once that happens, it's pretty easy to close. And again, I find it does depend on some other peripheral factors, like what's going on in the world around us, market-wise, economic-wise, geopolitically. But, all that being said, I mean, even still having that conversation and just getting on somebody's radar doesn't necessarily mean that you're down for the count. If they say, you know what, some things have changed. I really like you. I enjoyed our conversation. You opened my eyes to a few things. I'm just not ready to make that move. 6 months later, they might be knocking on your door again. So I find that if I can get at least 1 to 2 meetings or engagements, let's call them, from each month's worth of leads, there's a good chance that everything else kind of follows suit, rolls in on the back end as it should.
Great. And can you share what's the total AUM you've raised through SmartAsset?
We had about 14 million that came by way of SmartAsset over the life of the account. I'll say the first couple of years were a little choppy. And then in 22, things kind of slid off, but between 23 and 24, things really picked up. And it wasn't just luck. It was because we kept doing what we were doing. We didn't let anything discourage us. And, the hockey stick effect was very real. Assuming that the markets cooperate a little bit this year, I think we'll have another really good year. There's a ton in the pipeline still. I've got about another 14 million in the pipeline to date with people from either last year or the current year. If I were to scrape 23 and 22, I could probably come up with another 5 to 10 million that is still a viable source of let's call it prospecting material. And we will definitely do that. It's looking good. We're feeling good, and we're very, very excited to be a part of the platform and just proving out that this does work if you work it.
Well, Rob, thanks for sticking with it, and thanks for your time today. This has been great.